Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
G.I. Joe, the very best, America's elite. Eliter than all the rest, trained to have no flaws. Defending liberty across the land, valor oversized. Bring out that big brass band, real heroes verified. Gotta read them all, you must agree. Elitist in history, G.I. Joe, oh there could be no end. In a world we must defend, G.I. Joe, gotta read them all. A courageous crew, their colors red, white and blue. Mess with them and they'll shoot you. G.I. Joe, gotta read them all. Gotta read them all.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast. Depends on who you're asking, but if you ask me, that's what I say. If you are new to the show, you can find out all of the details at the website. The website is talkingjoe.co.uk. Today, we are continuing our look at the Disavowed era with G.I. Joe Special Missions Manhattan from Devil's Due, February 2006, which sort of places it just after the last lot of Disavowed issues that we covered. So I slot it in about after issue 8 or so is a good place to do this one. So for those of you reading along, this is collected in G.I. Joe America's Elite Special Missions trade paperback from March 2007. That edition collects 3 of the special missions, Manhattan, Tokyo, and Antarctica. Special missions Brazil and the Enemy were never collected, so you'll have to get those in the original comic book form when we get to them. After all of that intro, I will not be talking about these comics just by myself. As always, I will be joined by a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
Hey, Tim. So this is an interesting one. We've got Special Missions Manhattan, which is made up of one big story, one little story, and one teeny tiny story. Maybe we tackle each one on its own. So rather than giving an information overload of every single creative team and every single story, let's sort of walk through them one by one, maybe.
Sure. I do want to say from the outset that this is a double-sized comic. As the cover says, it's 48 pages. Although I'm gonna add an asterisk to that.
$4.95. That's
yes,
how much it cost.
Had a cover price of $4.95, and I love one-shots and double-sized one-shots. And G.I. Joe is such a good candidate for this because there are so many characters, and every writer in G.I. Joe history has had a challenge juggling so many characters, too many characters, when compared against the readers, the fans' desire to see their favorite characters. You know, you have the sort of most popular characters, you know, the 5 or 10 Joes and the 5 Cobras. And then you've got tiers and tiers of, you know, favorite characters, obscure characters, vehicle drivers. And so whether you call it special missions or not, whether it is written and drawn by sort of the regular creative team of the ongoing book or not, whether the stories in such a one-shot are self-contained, lightly connect to the ongoing story or very much connect to the ongoing story, this is a really good use of the comic book format for something as sprawling as G.I. Joe. And I sure wish we would see some of this with, you know, modern G.I. Joe, the new continuation of Real American Hero at Skybound. From a business perspective, a publisher can sometimes reasonably argue against doing this because almost certainly a special issue, let's say it's the same cover price as a regular issue, is going to sell less. Although nowadays you get around that by calling it an issue number 1, right? So you and I think of this as Special Missions Manhattan, but Devil's Due thinks of this as Special Missions Manhattan issue number 1. And so actually maybe you can get more sales than, issue 27 or 333. But if you think of, Marvel and DC annuals in the 1980s and 90s and 2000s mold, those were, yearly issues. They tended to be double-sized. They were more expensive. And they never sold as well because a lot of people just miss them, don't know about them. But from a story perspective, I am all for this.
Very good. That's a very insightful point that when you've got that sort of regular book with that huge sprawling cast and in at the moment in this chronology that the cast has been shrunk down to this core team and everyone's favorite characters and you're not necessarily going to be featured. So having a book like this with some fan favorites like, Mercer, Beachhead, Tunnel Rat, it's a great way of being able to have a book that spotlights some of those characters that wouldn't otherwise be used. And it also gives us a chance to sort of see a different writer's take and a different artist's take. So all around, I think it's win-win-win.
Yeah. I also enjoy how it feels holding a double-sized comic book. Just as an object. It's a little thicker, it's a little heavier, and I personally can pay $5 for a double-sized comic. Although as I record this in 2023, comics are $4 or $5, and double-sized issues are now $8 or $10. So that's the sound of me tugging my collar.
Yeah, there's a tipping point though, isn't there, Tim, for you, because you like a double-sized issue, but you don't like an omnibus edition. That's too big.
Yeah, I've actually long ago realized that if there's going to be an omnibus, the sweet spot for me is sort of the minimum omnibus of 650 pages, and I'll go up to 800 pages. I would consider owning an 800-page Marvel omnibus, but once it gets beyond that, it's too big. And this comes from a guy who gave the Civil War II omnibus to a friend as a present. And I think that was one of the 1,500-page ones, or the 11. Anyway.
We're getting distracted.
Yeah. Let's talk about G.I. Joe.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Let's have a look at the covers first, because this is the first thing we see. Tim, do you want to tell us what's going on the cover and what you think?
Yeah. So, as is somewhat embedded in all of the America's Elite covers, you start to get a lot of different fonts. So let's play this game. Count the fonts. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 if you get in really small. So
you're the font of all knowledge, Tim.
At the very top in orange letters and italics, 3 stories, 48 pages, non-stop action. And then instead of saying G.I. Joe America's Elite, it says G.I. Joe Special Missions. Special Missions takes the place of the America's Elite yellow letters in a black bar.
Yes. Yeah.
With some stars. And then under it, it says Manhattan. And Manhattan is sort of an old school, low resolution, like digital computer monitor font. And it doesn't actually say Manhattan. It says ... Manhattan ... which I take to mean some kind of communication or electronic readout, as if you were looking at like a ticker on the side of a building, or as if we are a Joe looking at what are the things on their wrists that go back to the beginning of the Devil's Due run. Their little
I can't remember what they called them. Yeah, the
communicators.
Yeah.
And also I've been looking at Yo-Joe and 3D Joes recently at action figures, and it's around this point that some of the action figures start having little things on their wrists that some of their weapons can stick on or in, I think. Anyway, I'm actually not concerned that this cover has so many fonts. I'm a little concerned from a design perspective that the top third of the cover isn't just like G.I. Joe, but like words, other words, title, more words, subtitle. And it gets a little busy. But the good news is that the imagery itself isn't too busy. And artist Jeremy Haun does, in the top, I'd say, the top sort of sixth of the cover, create a block of negative space. The camera is like 1 foot off the ground, and it's looking up at Beachhead and Covergirl, who are both sort of sitting, hiding behind a like a ledge. And I don't think they're on the ground. I think they may be sort of halfway up a building. But behind the actual G.I. Joe logo is some dark gray, which is a little bit of a sort of an overhang. So we're slightly under something looking at them. I really like their body language. I like their poses. I like that they're holding weapons. I like that there are bullets flying by. I like that the creators on the book are credited on the cover. I don't love the coloring. There's both a lot of white added to some of these colors, that green on Beachhead and also all of his sort of black, like his pouches and his boots. It's all very pasty. And then at the same time, sort of the browns and the gray, the browns of their clothing and the grays of the backgrounds seem to have a lot of black added. So pretty muddy. So not my cup of tea for coloring at all. And that coloring continues through the lead story. But this cover feels like a Marvel cover from, issues, 30 to 80. And it's always exciting when the Joes are pinned down and you can worry about them, as opposed to the opposite of this, where Joes might be sort of running at you and blasting away, like the cover to issue 1 or the cover to issue 45, Mike Zeck with Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow bursting through the doorway, or upcoming Andy Kubert's cover to 301. Here I'm worried about these two Joes, and this cover asks a slight question, which is, who is shooting at them?
Indeed. There's a second cover, which is a black and white NYCC exclusive cover, which seems to be using the artist Jeremy Haun's pin-ups for 3 of the main characters, Beachhead, Covergirl, and Tunnel Rat. And I see that a couple of these are in the collection, the original art this is, are in the collection of friend of the show, Shane Simick's Comic Art Fans Gallery.
Hello, Shane. When you say pinups, you mean the Data Desk profile pages in the issue?
Are they?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
So it's funny because this B cover, this New York Comic Con exclusive cover, it is more striking because it is black and white, and Jeremy Haun's art works really well in black and white. He's inking in an old school style where he's using a lot of spotted black ink. So the shading in Covergirl's hair, her pants, half of her torso, Tunnel Rat's rear leg, and some other bits here and there. At the same time, and there's no background, so these 3 characters really pop. At the same time, this cover gets really busy really fast because there are all these different words and fonts on the top, and then there are all these different words and logos. The Devil's Due logo, the New York Comic Con logo, the P.E.T.S logo at the bottom. I don't blame anyone for sort of overloading this underloaded cover. It makes for an interesting contrast. I will say I don't like, in any instance, interior art being reused as cover art. I don't like it when publishers nowadays do it for second printings. They'll take like a splash page from the issue or the big reveal on the last page, and they'll run that as the cover. I don't like it when, in this case, it's sort of pinup art, even though these 3 characters have been collaged together. And that's for 2 reasons. One, cover art and cover artists, when they're really good, they are thinking in a different way to grab your attention and to really make a statement with one image. And interior art, I guess the exception if it's a splash page, right? Which often does get used for reprint covers. But interior art is, more about continuity and storytelling and moments. So even in the hands of a good designer who's reusing some interior art, I don't think it's sort of intended to be the cover. And then also from a reader perspective, I find there's a lot less value. If I missed some exciting new issue in the last couple of years, but there's a second printing coming, I'll think, oh, good, I can still read it. And then if I get it and the cover is some like reused image from inside, it's like, well, didn't they hire some expensive artist to do the radical first printing cover? And I don't get that, you know? And also, if there's some like big spoiler that they're now just putting on the cover because it's already been spoiled, and now they're just trying to get like anyone to pick it up. Well, from a marketing perspective, they're doing their job. I picked it up, but as a reader, it's not something I want to take home and own. It's a lot less special. It reminds me a little bit of, I don't know, like buying a DVD without the sleeve. You know, that would be like buying a comic book with the cover ripped off. But I feel like a cover is too important to treat less carefully.
Mm-hmm. And I guess a cool thing about this one is that it is Special Missions Manhattan, and this was an NYCC exclusive. So it's kind of got that nice correlation of geography to title.
Yeah, so this was 2006. I think I went to that New York Comic Con. I mean, you know, if we're going to go a step further, wouldn't it be great if these three Joes were, you know, defending the Javits Center where New York Comic Con takes place? But, you know, you gotta prep these things quickly, and there may not be much of a budget. You know, a variant cover like this, I don't know, they're going to print 1,000 copies, and, you know, it's like what's easiest to do a month before the convention? You know, reuse some art as opposed to like someone look up how the Javits Center is shaped. Oh, that's a lot of glass.
Okay, so the first story in this is the headline story, Special Missions Manhattan.
Can we talk just for a moment about the inside front cover? If you pick up this comic, you see these two Joes on the cover, and you turn the page, and the inside front cover is those headshots of all the Joes that are the regular characters in the main book. And they've got their names and code names and specialties. And then each one for their status in red, it says on assignment. And so what's happening here is the inside front cover is alluding to what's happening in the regular monthly book, right? No, this is the Joe Casey series, which has the small core cast of favorites, but they're not available for this story. So we're going to get we're going to get characters who aren't them.
Indeed. So the main story is Special Missions Manhattan, writer B. Claymore. That sounds a bit like a code name, doesn't it? Claymore. Very appropriate for G.I. Joe. Artist Jeremy Haun, colorist Dave Bryant, letterer Brian J. Crowley, and editor Mike O'Sullivan. So very a compacted plot briefing. A reserve team of Joes consisting of Beachhead, Covergirl, Lowlight, Mercer, and Tunnel Rat are called to duty to assault a building in New York City. The building contains an old toxin that Cobra created that a terrorist group has gotten hold of. The small Joe team is successful in capturing Neurotoxin, a Cobra agent who was trying to get hold of the virus, and ultimately find out that there was no virus and it was all an elaborate trap. Thoughts on this one, Tim?
A little talky, but great story. This is one of my favorite kinds of G.I. Joe stories, where Joes are making their way through an interior space, like a building. This reminds me of issue 95 of the original Marvel run, the Cobra Consulate building, or, you know, a Cobra headquarters, or, you know, the pit if something's gone wrong. It's great to see some old favorites like Tunnel Rat and Mercer. Mercer is sort of under-decorated. This new Devil's Due costume for him. And this does not correspond to an action figure of that time, correct?
Correct. It's taking some of the cues from his V1, V2, but it's its own thing. It's a little bit more sort of real world, a little bit more muted.
Yeah, he's got one tiny splash of color, and if you hadn't told me this was Mercer would not be my first guess.
What I did think was quite cool is that he does have his suppressed pistol that his V1 figure came with, or something very similar to it.
Oh yeah.
So it's those little touches, and nice to do, nice to have.
I thought that interestingly, this issue uses a a new action figure from the G.I. Joe action figure line of the day. And one of the sort of ideas we've gone back to is how much do the Devil's Due comics specifically use new vehicles and new figure designs? Somewhat, but they're not primary, right? The Devil's Due comics, both Blaylock and Jurwa and other writers are much more interested in telling a story or telling a continuation of the Marvel story. And this is very much an advertisement for a new action figure.
New toys!
Just to draw that out, the new character we're talking here is Neurotoxin, who was described as a toy as the Cobra Sand Scorpion leader / elite desert trooper. He was released as part of the Venom vs. Valor line in 2004, carded in a 2-pack with Razor Trooper. And his file card there talks more about him being, I guess that's Cobra Sand Scorpion, and not really referencing too much that name. So Devil's Due has sort of taken that name as inspiration, Neurotoxin, and sort of running with it a little bit further than the file cards suggest in terms of, someone who's into all of these potential, hazmat materials.
Yes. Jeremy Haun draws great eyes on page 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm skipping the ad. 5. The bottom of 5, there's a close-up of Beachhead, and just, the actual orbits, creases, eyebrows, bridge in the nose, very handsome. And I have picked on a G.I. Joe artist who does great work, who I don't think draws great eyes. So here's a contrast. Haun's work is not the most dynamic overall, and this story doesn't give him a lot of chances to sort of show that off if he was pushing in that direction. There are some action moments and a little bit of gunplay, but there's a lot of sort of standing around, like standing in sort of a tense soldier at the ready with a weapon pose, and a little bit of sitting. And I do think that he has a little bit of a weakness when it comes to making sort of interesting backgrounds in terms of an environment. And my example is on page 13, where we are looking through a diagonal, like, air vent. It sort of looks like we're looking through a chain link fence, and it's the first time that we've seen the bad guy terrorists, where it's these nameless bad guys who've taken over the lab. It's not this one specific Cobra. And there's a word balloon that says, "I have a visual on the extremists." And then we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys standing around, some of them holding weapons, and they're all sort of at the ready. And there's no background here, and I don't know what kind of room they're inside. And I thought that they were in a lab, and I thought that this would be an interesting space. You think of every time in the cartoon, in the G.I. Joe cartoon, we see a Cobra lab. There are all these interesting shapes, like sections of wall and monitors and buttons and vials and sort of raised sections. Or you think of in comic books, like who are the villains? AIM or Hydra, like a villain base. And there is a line here to separate where the floor becomes the wall, or sort of a color line where the wall becomes the ceiling. And I don't need to pick unduly on this one panel. And again, like, Moore doesn't give Haun a ton to work with, because this story is mostly just Joe's walking down hallways and going through doorways and occasionally going upstairs. But I do find the actual sort of like styling and population of this office building to be not too exciting.
A little bit minimalist, a little bit lacking in some of the dynamic backgrounds. I can see that you picked on that one particular panel, but it could have been almost any of them. I got big Die Hard vibes from this one. That is that sort of you're up against terrorists in a sort of office tower block, making your way through the various floors. And there's one bit where Mercer ties something around his middle and sort of jumps out of a window to get down onto another floor, which very much echoed Die Hard, where I think he uses a like a fire hose type thing to rappel down through some floors. So I just thought I'd note that similarity for the record.
Yeah, there's a it's sort of half joke and half real. After the film Die Hard was released, other movies came along where you could describe it as Die Hard blank blank, right? So Under
Die
Siege,
Hard on a boat, on a train.
Under Siege is Die Hard on a train. Under Siege 2 is Die Hard in a submarine, and Die Hard 2 is Die Hard in an airport, and Die Hard 3 is Die Hard in New York City, and G.I. Joe Special Missions Manhattan is a little bit of Die Hard in a G.I. Joe comic. But I don't think of this as unoriginal or sort of unfairly swiping. I think of it as a good concept, and then there is this one Die Hard reference. But I also feel like if you're going to have a G.I. Joe story in a building, in a universe where the Die Hard movie never happened, I feel like there's a pretty good chance that a G.I. Joe writer in a story where a building's been taken over, I feel like someone might go out a window and swing into a lower floor. So I don't feel like this is sort of unfairly or lazily cribbing from or sort of homaging Die Hard. Okay, so there are a couple character dynamics that I wanted to point out and get your reaction to. So Mercer's being a little bit of a nudge when it comes to CoverGirl. He makes two references to her being her former career as a model, as if she's so attractive or distracting that she can sort of do the less interesting part of this mission, or she can just distract the villains, and that maybe she's not a fully fledged soldier like they are. And, Mercer never showed up in the Larry Hama G.I. Joe comic. And, he almost steals the show in G.I. Joe, the animated movie. And Devil's Due has used him before. So these first of two character sort of ticks, I wanted to get your reaction. How do you feel about Mercer being a jerk and CoverGirl pushing back?
Yeah, I mean, CoverGirl's been a Joe and a soldier long enough that, you'd feel she's kind of paid her dues. But Mercer, we don't know very much about. We've only seen him really in passing in the Devil's Due comic in a couple of occasions. And, maybe let's sort of try and explain this from a storytelling perspective. Maybe he is a bit of a jerk. Maybe he is a bit of a misogynist. And, he did join Cobra after all. So maybe he's not all good. But having come to Joe late and not spent much time in that core team, maybe he's not spent a huge amount of time with CoverGirl. And this is almost his kind of initial reaction, and I don't know, maybe he's uncomfortable. Maybe he's projecting his uncomfortability in sort of the presence of CoverGirl, and he's sort of negging, as you might say.
My second character interaction of note is on page 15. Tunnel Rat has, over the radio, gotten the cue to turn off the lights. He turns off the lights, and the three Joes enter a room, and Lowlight takes out the bad guys. And there's an all-black panel, and there's a word balloon that must be Beachhead saying, "Tunnel Rat, bring them up!" And then over the radio, Tunnel Rat says, "That better, sweetheart?" And then Beachhead says, "Don't you call me sweetheart." And I'm sorry if this was your I Spy, but this is a reference to G.I. Joe the movie, the animated movie from 1987, where Beachhead has the Rawhides, quote unquote. That's the name for these 5 or 6 new recruits that he's putting through their paces, and he wants them to stand at attention with their backs straight and their chests out. And Tunnel Rat has some attitude, and he says, "That better, sweetheart?" And then so Beachhead's a real tough ass in that scene, and it's great.
Hot hand, ho! I want a stone cold righteous attention. Your chin is down, your chest out, your gut in, your face mean, 'cause you are rough, tough, fighting machines.
That better, sweetheart?
Don't you call me sweetheart.
And I don't love the comic making a reference to the animated movie. I understand that Devil's Due's storyline is a continuation of the Marvel comic with some elements from the cartoon. And I don't know what the percentage is. It's not 50-50. It's, I feel like, 70% Marvel, 10% some completely new thing that Devil's Due was going to do, and like 20% from the cartoon. You know, Tom X and Zaymod and Extensive Enterprises. But I don't understand why in this moment Tunnel Rat is sort of cute or jokey. Like, there's no reason for him to say, that better, sweetheart. You know, it's like, Mark, if you said to me right now, like, oh, Tim, your levels are kind of low. And I'm like, all right, let me turn them up. That better, sweetheart? It's like, what, did you just piss me off? Like, no, you just asked me to do something. So, like, you know, Beachhead didn't say, like, Tunnel Rat, you'd better turn the lights back on when I say, unlike the last mission, oh, Tunnel Rat, what a jerk and a terrible soldier you are. It's like, no, he says, I'm going to need you to turn the lights out and then turn them back on. And that's the previous page. So, one, I think the reference to the movie is overly cute and distracting, so I don't like it. And two, it's not earned, so it's distracting. It's like, why are they being cute and snippy at each other? So, no thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if this makes any more sense, but when I was, because I don't think it necessarily does, but when I was reading it, I imagined that it might have been CoverGirl that said that Tunnel Rat, bring him back up. That better, sweetheart? And of course, he's talking to everybody on the thing, and then...
Except that the word balloon is on the left. And
right.
in the next panel, Beachhead's on the left.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, and then there's a slight thing in this same actual panel that I didn't like, where there are two panels that are all black or almost all black in a row, and this is again page 15. There are a bunch of sound effects, pock, 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 the sound of a Joe picking off these terrorists, and it turns out to be low light. And then there's the second all black panel, and then the lights come back on, and these three Joes are in sort of firing stance, right? They're ready to shoot, and Lowlight is front and center and kneeling. The other two Joes are behind him standing. And then there's a reverse angle, which is basically Lowlight's point of view, and we can now see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 dead terrorists, right? And CoverGirl says, whoa. And then in the final panel of the page, she says, good work, Lowlight. And I appreciate that she's complimenting her very capable teammates' highly tuned skills, but I don't understand that whoa. Like, he's wearing night vision goggles. This is what he does. And this isn't their first mission together, and it's not her first mission. And this is sort of a small thing. This doesn't ruin the comic for me, but it does stick out a little bit. And I feel like a different writer would have just cut the whoa and had her say, good work, Lowlight, or change the whoa so that it can indicate something like, whoa, there were more of these guys than I thought, or whoa, these guys were closer to pressing the detonate button than I thought. But without any other context, I just read this as her reacting to, whoa, Lowlight, you're so good at your job. It's like, yes, he's literally the best of the best. He's on a team with 100 other people, and they are the best at this there is. So that word is not necessary.
Generally, I liked this issue. There was one point, and it's a point about this story, but more generally about similar types of endings to these types of stories, where what we find is that there was never actually a real terrorist threat. It was an elaborate plan to draw someone out and capture them, and the Joes just never knew about it. You know, there's been various other examples in the Marvel run. I'm thinking like Special Missions number 8, which actually included Lowlight's probably biggest appearance, where they were on a mission to take out somebody, and in the end, he, instead of shooting him, he took his briefcase full of chips. And this particular bit, the frustrating point for me was that it was this trap to draw out the cobras, but then the Joes were sort of kept in the dark for no reason, and also they reacted to it as an emergency, drawing out these reserves who just happened to be locally there again for no reason. And while they're the best of the best, and they handled it very capably, putting them in harm's way for again no reason. If it was an elaborate sting, surely they could have handled it in a different way. So the majority of the comic worked well for me, and I enjoyed it, but just that last little bit just seemed a bit frustrating for me. If you are going to sort of have an elaborate sting, try and get those cobras. Why not just have everything set up ready to do it?
I see your point. I haven't read any stories recently where the Joes get the short end of the stick at the end and it's a surprise. And so this one felt like sort of in keeping with that, rather than sort of maybe doing it one time too many, or sort of incorrectly measuring the stakes. So I did like the ending, because the Joes often get the short end of the stick. Where the final page is a little flat for me is in Haun's art and storytelling, where the first two panels are comps. The first panel is drawn, and then the second panel is sort of a comp of the second panel, like a photocopy, except 2 or 3 little things have been changed. And I don't love that. But also, if you just look at the final page sort of overall, like, yes, they're all just standing in this room, this sort of clean room or debriefing room or waiting room. And maybe there shouldn't be anything exciting about it because it's a waiting room. They're not in the main Joe headquarters by the giant monitor. They're not in, some lab or tech facility. But, I just look at the first 2 panels and I barely see any color, right? So this is also a comment about color, right? It's just sort of like dark gray brown, 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 and the sort of non-background color. And then it happens again for the second panel. And then for the third panel, the camera pulls back, and Haun does some good body language throughout this issue. I find his poses and his art a tiny bit stiff, but I appreciate how much he's doing photo reference and acting. So I don't mind the stiffness. Like, this is not, the like Jack Kirby or John Buscema, like violent football player ballet of how characters contort through space. This is definitely not that. This is coming from a different place. And for G.I. Joe, it's totally appropriate. But sort of this like triple whammy of these final 3 panels where you're getting this like wah wah on the Joes, like, sorry Joes, you got used, but they're just standing there and there's sort of no background. So from a visual, that this final page is like it's no feast. It's like a cracker on a plastic plate.
And a Christmas cracker joke at the end as well. I guess that it's ending on them laughing, which is it's sort of a bit of a Saturday morning cartoon trope in itself, isn't it? So
well,
thinking, like,
okay,
He-Man, Thundercats, sort of.
The reason why
lends it on a laugh.
The reason why this doesn't hit me in that way is because I often think of the camera pulling back in a Thundercats or He-Man finale and sort of everyone laughing and it being forced. And this is one Joe saying "ha," so it's actually not at that level. I can see how it might remind you of that. So I like this story. And hey, another obscure Joe shows up in the form of Airtight.
Right. Yeah, I thought you were about to say someone else, but yeah, another outing for...
Although, actually, wait, who's the guy in the orange hazmat suit on the third to last page?
I think that must be a generic person.
Okay. Because if it's... Everyone remember the rule of 3s. If it's 1, you think it's a specific person. If it's 2, it sort of draws attention to itself because there's symmetry. Like the bottom panel of that page, the 2, I guess, green shirts, the blonde guy and the brown-haired guy who are opening the doors, but also holding their machine guns awfully casually. Considering we're inside, geez. Actually, that reminds me of the first episode of G.I. Joe, which I just rewatched, where Major Juanita Hooper chastises the Joes inside a base, and she says, "And put your weapon, and leave your weapons outside. This isn't a combat mission, for pity's sake." But you have this guy in orange, actually, who looks exactly like an orange hazmat suit Playmobil figure that my wife bought. If you had one, you think it's a person specifically. If you had two, it draws attention to itself because it's like two guards. If you have three, then it's like, oh, well, the Joes are, hanging out with some hazmat guys.
But speaking of casual, the Joes there sort of sat in this waiting room with this one guy in a hazmat suit and the enemy Cobra sort of tied up, sat on a sofa, and they're all just sort of, clutching on their cups of coffee, having a post-mission brew. But having at that point thinking that they've been exposed to a deadly toxin and are probably going to die any minute soon, quite chilled, quite relaxed.
Yeah.
My objection, I've just had a thought about that, and I think the probably there just needs to be a small tweak, and my objection would have gone. And I think my rewrite would be something like Stalker coming in and saying, we had this mission all set up, ready and waiting to deal with the Cobras, but unfortunately the team was called away on another urgent mission, and when trouble struck, we weren't here, so I had to call in the reserves. Something like that, rather than I think that would right away my niggles on that particular problem. You mentioned that there was an appearance of a rare Joe, and then said it was airtight. I thought you were going to say Sparks.
Oh, yeah. I think we've seen Sparks a few times in Devil's Due.
Have we? I don't know. Maybe. I looked it up because I wasn't sure. And according to the site that I looked at, this appears to be his first appearance in a comic.
Oh.
G.I. Joe Special Missions Manhattan.
Okay.
His G.I.JOE America's Elite credited first appearance is issue 11. He also appears in G.I. Joe Declassified and Scarlet Declassified. So yeah, he's I think it appears to be just around about this time that he starts appearing as a G.I. Joe team member. It might be I'm misremembering, and he has appeared before. Certainly I've seen a fair few comics with him now, but like sort of, remembering the order that you read them versus the order that they came out, it's not always completely clear.
I would defer to you that this is indeed his first comics appearance. We should note for listeners who more buy the toys or read the comics and don't watch the cartoon, that sort of his inclusion. Let's assume that this is his first appearance in comics. While I do this talking, maybe you can look up when his first action figure is. So, listeners, Sparks is a funny sort of G.I. Joe character because he shows up in 4 episodes of the Marvel Sunbow cartoon in 84 and 86. And he seems to be a made-up character for the G.I. Joe cartoon. And it was confusing to me because he does what Breaker does in the 1983 episodes, right? He's the Joe's communications officer. He's the guy who's sitting at the big computer when Cobra Commander, it happens in the first miniseries, and I think it happens in the second miniseries, and probably the third, when Cobra Commander takes over the airwaves and threatens the nations of the world with, his newest 5-part MacGuffin. And if I had to guess, and I haven't done any inquiring with people who worked on the show in my book research, but, Breaker as an action figure is 82, 83. He's phased out in 84. And there really were memos from Sunbow to Sunbow and Marvel reminding the writers when certain characters or vehicles were phased out. Like, don't use this character or vehicle anymore, or try not to use this character or vehicle anymore. That's an old toy. We're not pushing them anymore. And in a lot of cases, you just swap someone else in. But, and I don't know if there was some hope that maybe, Sparks would become an action figure, or if, like Admiral Ledger in the animated show, he's just a character that, writer Ron Friedman created for the show because he needed a few additional characters to fill out because the, first 30 Joe characters can't do everything that the story demands of them. But just again, to say it in a sentence, he hadn't had an action figure, and he hadn't been a proper Joe. He's, we think of characters like Cool Breeze or Quinn or Dr. Venom, who are created just for the comic book. And we tend not to think about the characters who were created just for the show. And he is one of them. So tell us, did he get a figure much later?
Yeah, he got a figure in 2007 as Alex, inverted commas, Sparks Verdi, communications expert. He was the 2007 International G.I. Joe Convention Tanks for the Memories box set from the G.I. Joe Collectors Club, and that appears to be his only official release. I'm aware that Black Major is producing a sort of a 1982 style figure, I guess, sort of trying to tap into the demand for an authentic looking original version of that. But yeah, surprisingly, it looks like he's only had one official release.
And this action figure that did come out as a convention exclusive in 2007 it's an O-ring figure made up of a basic shirt, tunic, basic pants, and only kind of matches the animation model sheet. It's a white guy. He didn't suddenly grow a beard or lose a beard, but he doesn't have the right sort of arrangement of elements on his shirt or his pants, and the colors are pretty close, but so sort of an Easter egg Joe.
Indeed.
I spy with my little eye.
I had an I Spy just for this story, which was that I think this might be the first story where Tunnel Rat is shown featuring sort of red infrared style goggles. There were goggles included in a previous story and the 2004 figure, but those look to be clear. But more and more after this story, when we see Tunnel Rat, he more frequently appears with these sort of red goggles, which becomes a little bit more canonical. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
To his character, to the extent that the new classified Tunnel Rat figure comes with those red goggles.
This isn't quite an I Spy. I think this is just a coincidence. But Mercer on page 7 looks like Josh Blaylock. I have a big I Spy. Can I do the big I Spy for page 9?
Oh, of course. I just wrote this down and then forgot to say it. Where did I write it? Yes, go on. Say your
So the Joes get on this elevator, and the elevator stops too soon. And this is one of those things in comics where you might need someone to say it because it's actually hard to just draw it. And the door opens, and there is an old man with white hair and glasses and a big white mustache and sort of a bedraggled, untucked button-up shirt and suspenders, and a janitor's pushcart with a squeegee and a broom. And someone says, "Hold it." And he says, "Janitorial staff, but let me do the voice you might recognize from this Sunbow Marvel episode. Janitorial staff." And then Covergirl says something funny, and the Joes continue on their mission. He's shocked because they have guns. And then he says, "Man, I gotta get back on days," as in, I don't want to do the overnight shift anymore. And it is the Viper from the, I don't remember if it's 85 or 86 episode, The Viper is Coming, wherein the Joes keep getting phone calls from a mysterious voice character who says, "I am the Viper." And then he gives them numbers, and they go after Cobra, and the episode ends on a joke where all the Joes have set up all their equipment because they're expecting this attack from this mysterious, it's got to be 85, because this is before 86 when there is an action figure named Viper, the Cobra Vipers. So it's an 85 episode. And the joke at the end is that this old man shows up with a little pushcart, and he says, "I am the Viper. I've come to vipe your windows." And then the camera pulls back, and I'm sorry, classic movie fans. I believe this is a joke that's borrowed from I forget, like a Marx Brothers routine or something. I don't think this joke was invented for this Marvel Sunbow episode of G.I. Joe, but it was used to great effect across 22 minutes. So, all right, so cute animation reference there, which actually sort of doesn't bother me the way that the Tunnel Rat Beachhead Sweetheart exchange does, but I could also live without it. You know, I don't need any G.I. Joe writer to sort of nudge me in the ribs with their elbow and say, see, remember the thing? Like, no, I'm a big G.I. Joe fan. I remember the thing. It's like, no, I might watch that episode next week. Like, you remind, it's like in Rise of Cobra, the live action film, when the Joes are briefing and Hawk explains the plan, and who is it? Duke says, Ripcord says, now we know. And then Hawk said, Dennis Quaid says, and knowing is half the battle. It's like, no, thanks. I don't need that. That's just like, it's like the movie like got paused for a moment and director Stephen Sommers like steps out in front of the actors and is like talking to the camera. It's like, hey, everyone, remember the cartoon? I do too. So I'm okay seeing the Viper, but I'm also, I guess I'd prefer it if it wasn't there. But this isn't points off.
Yeah, it's also sort of a button that they've pressed before, that we've the sort of homages to that Viper character have kind of cropped up in Devil's Due already to this point. So it's like,
oh right, isn't he in the background in like, what is it, Devil's Due 17? It's like when the Joes are on that bar.
Yeah, when they're in the bar. Yeah, he's one of the background characters there. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, like, I think this is a different editor by this point, so or maybe not. Like, this is the kind of thing that an editor might catch and say, like, okay, B. Claymore, like, thanks, maybe don't do this. You know, we haven't mentioned, I just wanted to say two quick things. B. Claymore, I think this is his first G.I. Joe story. His writing in comics I have not read before, but he is known for a creator-owned series called Hawaiian Dick, and he had previously collaborated with Jeremy Haun at Image and Oni on a series called Battle Hymn and another series called The Leading Man. And B. Claymore has done a little bit of work for DC here and there and some other publishers. And Jeremy Haun, the first time I was aware of his work was during Marvel's Civil War in 2006. So about 6 months after this G.I. Joe story comes out, he drew an Iron Man Captain America special, which I thought was kind of bad at the time, which was sort of halfway through Civil War. Iron Man and Captain America like have a talk, and they kind of end up arguing and fighting. And this felt like a cash in, like, oh, the story's going to be over in 3 months. Let's make some additional comics to like fill out the story because we can make money. But there wasn't a lot of story to tell, but I bought it because I was buying a lot of Civil War at the time. And I remember thinking that Jeremy Haun's art was quite clean, but too stiff for superhero dynamics, particularly compared against the more dynamic cover on that Civil War special by another artist. So those are my final thoughts on the lead story. In Special Missions.
The next page over, we've got the list of reserves. So it's like specialities and then a list of various Joes there. I think that whenever someone tries to create a list like this, I'm sure it takes quite a long time to put together, and then probably gets a load of letters back saying, you got that bit wrong. What about this character? You've included this person and they're dead, or you've got a list of dead people and you've forgotten about this character.
I love this list.
What I say is it's good value for money putting in the things like this, because you can flick over a single page in a comic book, a narrative page, within a few seconds. One like this gives you an opportunity to just pore over it for ages.
Yes. It also, even though and again, this is designed in the America's Elite data desk, styling where it's
Mhm.
it's blue and green and red font, sort of like a blocky digital font on a gray background, as if we're looking at a computer screen. And Devil's Due issues have been using this look now for several issues. But even though on the top it says reserves, it does include all the active Joes. So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I guess Sparks is an advisor. The 10 active Joes, the one advisor, and then all these others are reserves. And it's really fun because sometimes I sort of forget what a particular Joe does because I haven't memorized all the file cards. And a list like this reminds me. I like this for two more reasons. One, it includes the two places where a G.I. Joe codename was reused. So there's Airborne, last name Talltree, and Airborne, last name Six. So that's the original, that's the early Joe who's in some episodes of the show and some early Marvel issues. And then also the Airborne who shows up in Sky Patrol. And then also in the fourth column, it includes the two long ranges, one of whom must be the driver of the Thunderclap, and the other of whom, I don't know who that is, but I know that there was some like naming glitches, you know, in the 2000s because of copyright stuff.
Yeah, they had a Sigma 6 long range, I believe, who was like a guy with like, I think he had like a long trench coat, and I think he was like a sniper or something.
Okay.
Like that.
Maybe you want to, maybe while I say this next sentence, you want to Google that and see if that guy's last name is Fritz or Garcia. There is a list of deceased Joes, which makes me a little sad, but I also find helpful because it's a good reminder of sort of why I haven't seen someone in a while. And okay, so Hama killed some guys in the Marvel run, and Jurwa killed some guys in his run, and I forget, maybe Blaylock killed one or two. Oh, and there are two sneak peeks in the deceased list, two last names there. But also, the second to last category before deceased is training drill instruction, and Captain Gridiron, Fridge, Hollow Point, I don't know who that is, and Sergeant Slaughter. So also somewhere in the list is Super Soldier. So I appreciate the and Sergeant Savage. Sergeant Savage is listed, and so is Big Lob. Wow, this introduces a lot of. Oh, and they're two Dusties because I guess anyway. So fascinating list, probably filled with not mistakes but things worth arguing. And then you turn the page, and there are 8 pages of character profiles, and that's cool because these 8 characters were just in this story, but I would much rather 8 more pages of comics. So thank you, but no thank you.
But I'll repeat again. I think good value for money in terms of, you know, big blocks of text, lots of stuff to wade through, and some additional art. Long range, we've got Long Range V1, who is Carl W. Fritz, and he is the Thunderclap driver. You then had Long Range version 2, who is Alejandro Garcia, who is the driver of the ROCC, Rolling Operations Command Center, in 2005. And then you had a Long Range Sniper, which is the Sigma 6 marksman with the coat and the sharp sideburns.
Cool.
A couple of the things that I noticed on that reserves list was, there's quite a lot of names there that have never actually featured in the comic before. So it's like you're kind of introducing them to the team and saying they're part of that universe without them ever actually appearing there before, which is slightly odd, but it's comprehensive. You had Action Man on Covert Ops, who it was hinted was the same person as Tracker, who features on the Deceased, because they had the same figure. I also noticed under Animal Handling there was Mutt, no law, he's probably somewhere else. You had Dr. Talbot, who I had to look up and remind myself that stands for Dr. Link Talbot, who is his speciality is combat veterinarian, and I believe that he had a big part to play in the Venom versus Valor, I believe it was.
Yeah, because Cobras mixing soldiers with DNA, and the Joes have animals. And we haven't seen Ice Cream Soldier in any comics, right? Or was he in one panel?
No.
Was he in one panel?
Maybe in a
Devil's Due?
background panel something. Yeah. On these data desk handbook entries, I found my sort of favorite piece of dialogue. It's not really dialogue, but it's some words. On Beachhead, it said, though Beachhead constantly gains respect from all that he encounters, he'll demand it before you have a chance to offer it.
We should point out that these data desk handbook pages are written by Sam Wells and Mike O'Sullivan. That's the credit from the inside front cover of the issue. And the art for this first batch is Jeremy Haun and Dave Bryant, just like the story that we have just read. And that leads us to the next story.
Brother's Keeper, written by Mike O'Sullivan, artist Tim Seeley, colorist John Rauch, letterer Brian J. Crowley. So an overview. In order to even the score between brothers, Blackout, aka Thomas Stall, kills several Cobra agents that were planning on capturing a commercial airline that his brother, Barrel Roll, aka Dwight Stall, is flying. Yeah, short and sweet. It's only,
Five
2,
pages.
3, 4, 5 pages, of which mostly silent for the first 3.
Yeah, and reveals that Barrel Roll, Dwight Stahl, a Joe that we saw in an earlier Devil's Due couple of issues, is now a commercial airline pilot. So with the switch from the main Devil's Due book to the Joe Casey America's Elite, most of the Joe team was put on reserves, and they went to or back to their civilian lives or their day jobs. And Barrel Roll, he's on the cover to is it Devil's Due 31, 27, something like that, where it's just a guy in blue and gray flying up toward you away from an atoll, and he's got a helmet on that's got a little bit of red detailing to sort of look like he's a Cobra. Isn't that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's Barrel Roll in his Spy Troops gear.
that's right.
So I thought this story, in terms of writing, was quite good, and a very good use of just a few pages, right?
Yeah.
It's only 5 pages, and many people cannot pull off a satisfying comic in 5 pages.
Yeah.
Particularly with so little dialogue. But I think the art is just sort of and the coloring, I think this coloring might look good on a computer monitor, but man, I don't think this coloring looks good printed on the comic that I'm holding, because the first page, it doesn't feel like the story was inked. It feels like it's, I think actually the whole story, is pencils only. And so you have a couple places where I think the colorist is like filling something in completely black, like the silhouette guy on the 3rd panel of the first page. The 3rd panel of the whole story, right? Guy looking behind maroon curtain. And that works there. But then on the next panel, where blonde guy who looks like Duke is dragging someone into a remarkably large lavatory, it's like nothing. If you think of a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 is your brightest white and 10 is black, right? An even value structure is going to have things in the low numbers, like 1, 2, 3, things in the middle, 4, 5, 6, and things in the darks, like 7, 8, 9, 10. And this, I've talked about this before, and I think the big comparison was in previous stories that were pencils only and then colored aggressively in a modern computer style. I think the comparison then was Extreme X-Men, that comic from like 2000 that was drawn by Salvador LaRocca and colored by Liquid at Marvel, which was pencils only. And then on the 5th panel of this first page, that silhouette behind the 2 flight attendants, it reads sort of as a person who's all shaded out walking by. It also just sort of reads like a hole in space, like a hole in my comic page, because that's in a panel like this, you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. You don't have any like darker darks, or you don't have any darker darks that are being properly, what's the word, like anchored together. So the panel starts to like break up into its constituent parts. So I think some of the coloring here is sort of handsome. I think some of it's like overly noodly, but the coloring for the coloring and the art are at odds with each other. And I've said this before, I still find, and having him on the show was great. I loved talking to Tim Seeley. His actual comic book art, I find unexciting and not dynamic. It's like there's a lot of like up down, sort of stiff, like sitting and standing and walking, and there's another artist who's not doing a lot of like John Buscema football ballet, like contorting in space. That said, Seeley's storytelling here is clear, his visual storytelling. And I really like that panel on the third page where Blackout, is tapping a little vial into a glass, because there's a tiny yellow sort of like star shape. It's like a little, it's not actually a spark, but it sort of reads like a spark under the index finger, which to me says like tap tap as just a little visual effect. I think it's a nice bit.
Yeah. And overall, I think, you know, as you say, my takeout is it's difficult to do stuff with short stories and make it feel satisfying. And I think they do a good job of that. And having like a special like this outside of the main book where there's all of these sorts of dynamics and plot points and dangling threads that have been established in the previous run of G.I. Joe, which Joe Casey is not necessarily going to explore. Having something like this, which is just sort of moving some of those plot points along in the background and checking in on those characters and stuff, it's a really great use of that extra space and that book to do that, because you know that blackout barrel roll dynamic that they introduced was interesting, and it was a shame that if it wasn't going to be followed up by just so having this sort of as a way of checking in on those characters is a good way of keeping it sort of fresh in the reader's mind. And when the comic will eventually get back to it, it's not like it's coming out of nowhere because we've had that check in. So I think an effective use of a short story.
Now, as a counterpoint, I like the story. It does stick out to me that the first 3 pages are wordless, and then page 4 has some dialogue, and then pages 4 and 5 are slightly overcompensating because now he's explaining everything to you. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's necessary, because I didn't know that as soon as someone said this is Dwight, I thought, oh, wasn't there a Hasbro employee named Dwight? Wasn't there a Joe named Dwight after that? Oh, is this the guy who's got the brother? Didn't Mark and Jay and I talk about this in a previous episode? Oh, the cover where the guy's flying in a jetpack over the atoll and he looks like a cobra. Okay, that. And then there's this third panel on a tier. Tom, where are you? Good flying tonight, kid. So on balance, I think this is a good story in terms of writing, but I'm aware that there's this sort of trade-off where you get this nice arrangement for the first 3 panels where it's all told visually, and then Blackout like explains everything to us. His brother. And I wish Mike O'Sullivan could have done that with a lighter touch on the final 2 pages. But, you know, the idea of the plot is still great, and I don't have any feelings for these 2 characters, but I think it's neat to check back in with them. And I think Seeley was drawing those issues at the time, so it's cool that he gets to check back in with these 2. And then we get 2 profile pages.
Yeah, telling us exactly who these, you know, it's because who knows what people have read up to this point, or indeed can remember from the previous run. So it's really telling us this is Barrel Roll, this is Blackout, this is what they're all about. So makes complete sense to have it there.
Interestingly, the color choices on the Barrel Roll data disc profile page, it's not the blue and gray like that cover that I mentioned. It's the brown and beige, although here it shows up more like a maroon from his version 2 figure, not 2003, but 2004. And then the blackout profile is colored to match the character's version 1 figure, because that did not get a recolored variant for the following year. You want to talk about P.E.T.S?
Yeah, so P.E.T.S, story by Sam Wells, Sean Dove, Mike O'Sullivan, and the rest of the G.I. Joe-Kers at Devil's Due. Art, Sean Dove, Russ Lowery, Stefano Caselli on that final page, and Daniele Rudoni, letterer Brian J. Crowley. Shipwrecks, Polly is having a dream where all of the Joe animals are fighting all of the Cobra animals, with Crystal Ball in the middle. And we conclude with a final panel of all of the animals facing off against each other, much like you might have seen in a Uncanny X-Men cover, perhaps, with then the final reveal being Stefano Caselli art, much more of a sort of less cartoony, realistic style, with a very detailed, non-cartoony Polly dreaming in its cage under a sheet, with Roadblock and Shipwreck speculating what on earth is Polly dreaming about.
All right, so this is a 5-page story, and I think the thing that pops out the most is that the art is simple and cartoony in a way that we have never seen in a G.I. Joe comic before. Even cartoonier than I have never read the G.I. Joe parody that was in Cracked magazine in, I don't know, 1985. I remember being grumpy when someone pointed it out to me, because I don't like people making fun of G.I. Joe. But this is cartoonier than Batman the Animated Series. This is like skinny arms and skinny legs and, cartoony eyes, and there are gradients in the color, but it looks more like a TV animation cell shaded coloring style, and it's all building to this joke on the final page, this reveal that it's Polly having a dream, right? In your plot breakdown, you led with that, and the way that the story starts, the animals are just attacking, and Crystal Ball is just gloating, and then we cut back to the real world with what has got to be the most realistically drawn panel of Polly in any G.I. Joe comic ever. The first panel of the final page. So realistic, I start to realize how much parrots look like lobsters and crabs. And I say this as a compliment. Because I sort of forget what parrots actually look like, because I'm so used to how simplified Polly is in the toys and in the cartoon, the same way that in a previous episode, I said that I'm always surprised when I see German Shepherds, that they're so big, because I'm used to Law and Order and the dog being so small in G.I. Joe toys. So how do you feel, Mark, about a 5-page cartoony backup story that's a gag?
It's fine. This is the place to do it. If you're going to have it anywhere, have it be a dream sequence. And I don't mind. I enjoy it when people are having a bit of an experimentation, do something different. And if it's sort of slightly to the side of the main continuity in the main story, then all the better for it. So yeah, it's a little bit of fun, and it's a kind of incongruity of G.I. Joe. You've got these different sort of takes that you can have of G.I. Joe, and the very beginning it's more grounded and more military, but then you've got the outrageous bits in the cartoon of likes of Iceberg turning into a killer whale, and you've got all of the monster type alien stuff happening towards the back end of the line. You've got neon ninjas, so G.I. Joe is different things. And if you're going to have a team of pets and you want to explain how there's a dolphin on the team, why not have it this way? So for those of you not so familiar with why a dolphin is on the G.I. Joe team, it was Deep Six version 3 from 1992 who came with Finback the dolphin.
I think I don't have any. I think I just agree that a special or an annual is the place to do this kind of story. If this happened in a main issue and the main story was shorter because of it, or they dropped the letters page, I think the Devil's Due team 5 years in has certainly earned a couple of pages to tell a little bit of a joke. And also this story is in continuity because, Stefano Caselli, then artist of the main book, America's Elite, draws the final page, or maybe it's just the final panel. And, that's actually Roadblock and actually Shipwreck, who are in Shipwreck's room. I don't know if it's at the base or in some kind of, submarine or something. But I also appreciate when, this is written by 3 people plus everyone else. Clearly they've earned this.
Yeah, they're just having fun, and why not? Cool. Are we done with this issue, do you think?
Yes. Oh, wait, error detected. Sorry, this was back in the lead story. Error detected. The moment when Mercer is tying the cord to the door, and he's about to go out the window. This is page 18. The sign next to the door says North Stairwell, Level 2, but the previous page had established that he's on the 9th floor.
I had something that I meant to mention to you, which I forgot about, which was on the first page of the Stahl brothers story, where he drags that guy into the toilet. What on earth is that sign on the wall?
That's a baby. That's a baby crawling.
Right. So it's maybe a baby table.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's actually the symbol or if Tim Seeley was just sort of closing his eyes and throwing a dart at a dartboard. Like, what do I draw? It's a baby on the floor getting, because it sort of looks like someone throwing up. Not in the act of throwing up, but someone being about to be sick, keeling over.
Yeah, the more common baby change symbol is a baby like on its back or being changed, whereas this is a crawling baby, which made me think: is this a special toilet for like very drunk people to stagger their way into? Right. Let's Joe scoreage this one. Tim, what do you reckon?
5. The lead story was going to be a 6, but the too many profile pages that could have been art color that I don't like on that second story, and I feel like the actual joke of the third story, it could be funnier and it could do more with the pets, with the animals. So I feel like sort of, pages 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, I'm going to give this comic book a 5.
Okay. I think I'll give it a 6. I think the lead story was quite capably done, was fun, good to touch in on some of those fan favorite Joes outside of the main story. I liked that we got a chance to check in with the Stahl brothers, because that was an interesting plot point of the previous arc before we got to America's Elite. And yeah, P.E.T.S was fun. I didn't mind that at all. And I thought the extras, the data files and the reserves list was a good value for money way of making this a much more substantial read, and something that you could spend quite a lot of time reading through this book and digesting all of that stuff rather than just a quick flick through. So yeah, a good value for money proposition. Very good. Now, before we close out, let's just have a quick look in Postbox the Pit to see what our listeners have been saying to us.
Hey, Mark. This is Rusty from San Francisco. As soon as I heard you guys were going to be covering Special Missions Manhattan, I dug out my floppy and went right to work. Overall, I thought it was okay. I liked the heist and the plot and the setup of the issue, but a lot of times I go to Joe for characterization and there just wasn't much there. I thought all the Joes and the main villain were pretty bland. I thought the terrorists were really just there for the sake of the story. We didn't know why they were doing it or what they wanted. One of the characters that I was really looking forward to learning about, I don't know why I don't know much about him, was Mercer. And I thought what little we got to know about him was offensive and it had a lot more potential. Sort of like we hear about when Storm Shadow becomes a Joe. Some people trust him, some people don't. To me, I didn't understand why they'd ever bother having Mercer on the team. Anyway, I'm about out of time, so I will leave you with that. I look forward, to hearing your review. And thanks again for all the hard work you put into this show. It's the highlight of my week when a new one comes out. Thanks.
Thanks for the kind words, Rusty. We do put this show together in a little bit of isolation. It's generally, me talking to Tim, maybe with someone else there at the time, and then we throw it out into the world. So it's great to hear that it is appreciated. And Tim won't respond with his opinion because I'm recording this and inserting it into the show long after we've actually spoken. Haha. If you want to get in contact with us like Rusty did, there are a number of different ways you can do it. You can go to our website, talkingjoe.co.uk, scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on the link to leave us a voice message. You can also send us an email. You can also interact with us on Facebook, or just listen with your old lug-olds. Back to me from the past. Let's see, next time on Talking Joe Disavowed, we will continue our look at the America's Elite era of G.I. Joe with issues 9 through 12. Back over on the other episodes, we will continue to cover all sorts of interesting stuff. We'll have some interviews lined up. And I'm sure other things will come up as well. So, Tim, where can people find you when you are not talking to me about G.I. Joe comics?
Video essays from my creative partners and I at our YouTube channel, Atomic Abe Productions. My brick and mortar comic book store in Somerville, Massachusetts is Hub Comics. And I write about G.I. Joe at arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent stuff. You can find more about Talking Joe at the usual places. TalkingJoe.co.uk is the website that has links to all of those places. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/TalkingJoe. So a big thanks to all of our backers: Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Brian, and Shane, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. And that is us done for now. But remember that
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.